A meeting will be held tomorrow between East German Premier Hans Modrow and West German Chancellor Helmut Kohl. When the Chancellor arrives at 9:15 in the morning, East German television will be broadcasting live from Dresden. After Dresden, I knew that reunification was going to happen. One way or another. I could see it was what the people wanted.
You could see their faces and the range of expressions. People cheering, but also people weeping. It was deeply moving.
Kohl saw himself as the victor. That's for sure. There was no stronger way of expressing the will of the people than saying, we belong together.
We will not abandon our compatriots in the German Democratic Republic.
That was what the people wanted to hear. They believed the Chancellor. They saw him as someone who'd gotten a lot done, so he'd get this done too.
In the future, peace must spring from German soil. That is the goal of our unity.
That was probably a contribution not only to German unity, but also to peace in Central Europe.
I'd say that emotionally, it was one of the most moving days of his life.
No one who was in Dresden on the 19th of December 1989 will ever forget that day. Dramatic as it may sound, it marked a turning point in German history. I'm Peter Limbourg. Back then, I was a reporter in Dresden with the cameraman Jürgen Heck. We were reporting for West German TV from what was still communist East Germany. We'd headed over the day the Berlin Wall fell and witnessed the system collapse. The people we met were euphoric about their newfound freedom, but also anxious. What was extraordinary was how we'd show up with a camera and a microphone, interviewing all these people, and they'd take us to where they lived and show us things. There was an openness that we hadn't expected. We assumed that they were all being spied on.
They didn't trust their own media. That's true. But they weren't worried about us because we came from the West. In fact, they often approached us first.
We spent 6 months traveling around East Germany. A lot has changed since then, and so have we. Good grief.
That was the reception with Hans Modrow.
Eating as usual. A lot slimmer. But fair enough. It was a special time. We had to make up a lot as we went along. I think we were the only TV team traveling around in a Trabi. The others had flashy Volvos. And there were we in a Trabi.
They'd come over from Berlin just for a day. We were there all the time, but we didn't have our own car.
For us, Helmut Kohl's visit to Dresden was one of the highlights of that transitional period after the fall of the wall. Jürgen and I are going back to the city to talk to others who were also there. 30 years on, what exactly made the 19th of December significant? And what was going on behind the scenes in December '89?
It was very quiet on the plane. Everyone was preoccupied with their thoughts. We didn't know what was going to happen. The atmosphere was very tense. Kohl warned us that we had to do everything in our power to avoid a volatile atmosphere.
The mood of euphoria and apprehension wasn't limited to Berlin. The Berlin Wall had fallen on the 9th of November, and after months of protests, the East German government had stepped down. Across Eastern Europe, the communist regimes were collapsing. People were celebrating, but the future of both Germanies was uncertain.
After the wall fell, everyone was on the phone to one another all the time. Whether it was Mitterrand, Margaret Thatcher, President Bush, or President Gorbachev. The bottom line was always, keep calm. Don't let anything get out of hand. Don't let things get chaotic. The whole process had to be kept under control.
3 weeks after the fall of the wall, Helmut Kohl unveiled a 10-point plan for German unity, including economic aid for East Germany, an easing of travel restrictions and free elections, then joint government committees, European and German unity as a common process.
No one knows today what a reunified Germany will look like. But I am confident that reunification will happen, if that's what the German people want.
Kohl kept his plan top secret until the very last minute, sharing it neither with his own coalition partners nor his international allies. Other than the Americans, who were shown it in German just before it was published. The British and the French were worried that Bonn was forging ahead with the plan without consulting them.
Certainly, Margaret Thatcher thought it was far too fast, but so did many, many other people. Mitterrand was talking loudly about that. But I think the reasons for the acceleration were, first, that the idea of unification was legitimized in Kohl's 10-point speech. It was accepted as the goal of Germany, West Germany, in this development.
President Gorbachev reacted very negatively to the 10-point plan speech. When the West German Foreign Minister Hans-Dietrich Genscher was in Moscow, Gorbachev said very clearly that he opposed it, that it was a dictate he couldn't accept. But if you look at the plan, there was no time frame. It was basically just an attempt to create a roadmap, not against the others, but with them.
If Kohl had first gone around trying to shore up support for what he had in mind, both on the domestic and the international stage, nothing would have ever happened. Nothing. I think it was very brave of him to have shouldered the responsibility by himself.
On the 11th of December, the ambassadors of the 4 Allied powers came together in Berlin for the first time in 18 years. They made it abundantly clear that German reunification could only happen with their approval.
This alarmed the West German government. They couldn't believe that the Allies were discussing Germany without their involvement.
Jürgen and I have arrived in Dresden. It feels strange to be here, like a trip back in time. 30 years ago, traveling to the east was a lot more complicated. There were barely any train connections between East and West Germany. Even Chancellor Kohl's plane needed the Allies' permission. The West German delegation wasn't sure how their visit to Dresden would be received by the East German public, not by the rest of the world. The Chancellor was acutely aware that the trip would be a high-wire act with the world watching. But then they were met at the airport by hundreds of people.
Most people didn't want the East German system anymore. They wanted reunification, and they wanted it as soon as it seemed in reach. The wall fell on the 9th of November because it was brought down from within. It wasn't opened up by the East German leadership, as is often said. The people wanted an end to communism, and they wanted reunification.
On the plane, he was unsure of what he would experience. But when he saw the cheering crowd still on top of the stairs, he turned to Rudolf Seiters, Minister of the Chancellery, and said, "It's a done deal."
Herr Ministerpräsident. Tag und herzlich willkommen, Herr Bundeskanzler. Ich freue mich, dass wir uns kennenlernen. Ich hoffe auf gute Gespräche.
Herr Bundeskanzler, herzlich willkommen in meinem Amtsbezirk.
A lot was also at stake for Hans Modrow, East Germany's new premier. Reunification was not on his agenda. What he wanted was financial aid for his badly run-down country.
Es sollte bei diesen Gesprächen ja im Wesentlichen darum gehen.
The point of the talks was to voice the demands and expectations we had of East Germany's democratization, and how it could be tied to economic and financial aid from the West. We didn't know that things would go in a completely different direction that day.
The men didn't know one another. Modrow was taken aback to realize that Kohl had prepared meticulously for the meeting.
We talked in the car that took us into town. I was surprised that Kohl had been briefed in detail on my biography, down to my childhood in the village of Jasenitz in western Pomerania. And I thought to myself, I could have told my own people to prepare a bit better.
People were lining the street on the drive into town. We couldn't go very fast. We could only crawl along the street. You could see the people's faces and the range of expression. People cheering, but also people weeping. It was deeply moving.
These Germans had chosen to hold the meeting in a hotel for foreign visitors. Contact with the public was to be kept to a minimum. But they hadn't bargained with the crowds who gathered ahead of the meeting between Kohl and Modrow. Thousands of people wanted to catch a glimpse of the West German Chancellor. Many were pinning their hopes on him.
It's what we want more than anything. We hope that the talks between Modrow and Kohl will make it happen. What we want is for the barriers that exist to be brought down today, and that we can take major steps towards German reunification. I hope that the talks are calm and objective. I think we're two very different countries, and we can't just be reconciled in a sudden fit of emotion.
We want things to change here. We want our lives to improve.
I want to see immediate steps taken toward German reunification. No further delay.
Jürgen and I were among the crowd.
I remember there was a lot of jostling. It was almost impossible to push your way through and ask a question. Kohl gave a few brief interviews, which made matters worse. The crush got worse when he got out of the car. The reporters from the West were used to elbowing their way to the front. The whole situation was insane.
The street had been partly blocked, but it didn't make a difference. There was such euphoria. People were there in droves. They were calling out, "Helmut, Helmut." It must have been very hard for Modrow. He was the country's leader, but he was completely ignored. It was all about the powerful man from the West. But in fact, Hans Modrow remembers it very differently.
There was a very mixed reception at the hotel. People weren't just there to greet Helmut, but to greet Hans, too. I'd worked in Dresden for many years. They had faith in me. I had a home advantage.
That was the first time we saw the Germany United Fatherland slogan. It was the message the world was getting in those days. Not only Germans saw this image, the whole world did.
Weltweit.
I remember him.
Incredible. At the press conference, the distance between the two leaders was immediately obvious.
I had no reason to foster a special friendship with Helmut Kohl. I wasn't Boris Yeltsin. Later, all those stories emerged about Gorbachev and meetings held in the sauna. We weren't friends, not even close.
Hans Modrow was a cautious man, and this was a very new situation for him. For 40 years, the Soviet Union had kept the East German leadership on a short leash. These people weren't used to using their own judgment.
Even though their positions were poles apart, Kohl tried to keep the mood upbeat.
Chancellor Kohl, you said you wanted to see if you could find common ground. Can you?
I believe so.
I believe that one-to-one talks have given us an opportunity to get to know one another. So it's possible that we will go on to find common ground.
The expectation was that Modrow would lay out the political and economic reforms he intended to launch. That's not what he did. He read out a speech on improved relations, disarmament, peace, love, and understanding. Utterly dull. No one cared. What should have been said was, Chancellor Kohl, we need to initiate reforms in East Germany. These are the priorities, and we need your help.
The talks lasted longer than planned. Both sides agreed to facilitate contact between East and West. But Kohl was aware that Modrow was not going to support his reunification plan. Their different positions on the question were impossible to overlook.
I am working on the premise that we have two independent sovereign states, and their continued existence is in the interests of European peace.
Kohl disagreed. His aim was to give the East Germans what they wanted, reunification. But he also had to assure his international allies that Germany would not be going it alone.
Everything that changes here will have an effect on developments in Europe, as we are acutely aware. When we consider our own interests, we must also consider the interests of others, not least the security interests. Here in the middle of Europe, in the middle of Germany, the interests of many are at stake, the interests of all of our neighbors.
Helmut Kohl knew he was on very, very thin ice. And this he expressed at the press conference. He said, I understand there is unease. I can see it. I see the impatience. But we have to be very careful that we don't destroy what we have just achieved just because we are too impatient.
"30 years later, there's not much left of that stuffy room in the Kulturpalast, Dresden, where the press conference took place. Okay, this looks totally different.
Totally.
This is incredible. Today, the venue is one of the city's top architectural attractions. It houses a concert hall, the home of the Dresden Philharmonic. We were quite near the front, close to the balustrade. We only had one camera. We had to make sure we'd be able to get out easily.
There was a lot of time pressure.
If you were at the back, you had a better chance of getting a quote when they left. We didn't manage that. The report we shot that day just about made it into the afternoon news.
Bundesrepublik und DDR wollen jetzt konkret über eine Vertragsgemeinschaft verhandeln. Ab Januar wird eine deutsch-deutsche Wirtschaftskommission ihre Arbeit aufnehmen. Eine Investitionsschutzgarantie wird von der DDR geleistet. Für Modrow ist dies aber kein Schritt zur Wiedervereinigung.
While the press conference was underway, growing numbers of East Germans gathered in front of the rubble of Dresden's Frauenkirche, the Church of Our Lady, destroyed in the Second World War. They followed the press conference on the radio. According to the official schedule, Kohl was to lay flowers at the ruins of the church, his last appointment of the day. A day earlier, the rumor had begun to spread like wildfire that Kohl would take the opportunity to give a speech. Crowds began to flood into the square. Would he or wouldn't he address the people? The speech had been announced by this man, Herbert Wagner. He was one of the organizers of the now legendary Monday demonstrations against the East German leadership that were taking place that autumn.
Wir wollen ganz einfach den Bundeskanzler herzlich willkommen heißen.
We want to give the West German Chancellor a warm welcome
An der Ruine der Frauenkirche.
and listen to what he has to say when he lays a wreath at 4 o'clock at the church ruin.
Was uns zu sagen hat.
After reunification, Herbert Wagner served as mayor of Dresden for several years. How had he known that Kohl would give that momentous speech?
4 Tage vor dem 19. Dezember.
4 days earlier, the deputy mayor had approached me and said it was possible that the chancellor would be giving a speech and that he was known to make last-minute decisions. So we needed to get ready for action.
No one could get ready for action better than the people who organized the Monday demonstrations. But then Kohl's speech simply wasn't mentioned again.
The days went by and there was no mention of the speech. But I had the impression that his speech could still happen. So I grabbed the opportunity at the very last minute, at the start of the Monday demonstration, to announce his appearance. The information spread like lightning. Everyone wanted to be there.
You stuck your neck out.
In those days, we were very full of hope.
Did you expect the crowds, the atmosphere?
I had no expectations. I just wanted people to be there.
Ahead of Kohl's visit to Dresden, Bonn had rejected the proposal that the Chancellor give a speech. But the mood in Dresden changed everything. Kohl wrote in his memoirs that he jotted down ideas that afternoon in his hotel room.
Seine eigenen Originale hat sich immer selber mitgenommen.
Das ist die.
Und das ist es, was ich immer unter auf Dunkelheit.
Today, those notes belong to his widow, Maike Kohl-Richter.
I think that was really an extraordinary day for my husband. Just think what happened. In the morning, there were the people chanting, "Unity, unity, Helmut, Helmut." As a politician, if you don't have an answer for the people, if you don't talk to them, then I'd say you missed your calling.
In fact, Kohl had prepared for the speech in advance.
Das war schon am Abend vorher.
The evening before, Rudolf Zeiters, the Chancellor, and I sat down together in the Chancellery for a brainstorming session, if you will.
Und haben zusammen, wenn Sie so wollen, Brainstorming gemacht. Einfach was uns.
We came up with a few ideas, and he made brief notes.
Und hat sich nur Stichpunkte gemacht.
That was on A4 paper with a thick felt-tip pen.
In Kohl's memoirs, he said that he wrote his notes in his hotel room that same day.
I wouldn't set much store by memoirs.
It wasn't definitely going to happen. The idea was to wait and see how things developed. There was no fixed script.
The excitement was mounting at the church. Tens of thousands of people had gathered to see Kohl, some of whom longed for unity alongside others who still believed in the communist regime, including public servants.
You'll have to work for the first time in your life. Not just collect your salary. You got regular training. You took regular holiday. Got a new medal every year. We paid for that, and we're still paying.
The atmosphere is volatile. Are you worried that the situation could escalate?
No one can predict what will happen. I certainly hope it doesn't.
There were fears both among Kohl's supporters and his critics that the other side would turn nasty.
They're left-wing extremists, and they're everywhere. If we can't get rid of them, you have to help us.
Listen here, my friend. I was in the middle of the crowd, and the ones calling for unity were the worst. My job here is just to keep the peace. But I almost got a thrashing from a couple of guys.
That's not okay.
The punks ran off, and those guys ran after them, yelling, "You red pigs!" It was like being back in the Nazi era. If that's how they want to go about unity...
That's not okay. We don't want any kinds of radicals. There were plenty of people who said, be careful with reunification. It's not what we want. What we want is a democratic East Germany. But they were in the minority.
Kohl's biggest concern was that the crowd would erupt. That there would be aggression, fights, nationalistic outbursts. That could have easily shaken up the Second World War's 4 victorious powers.
Supporters of the East German peace movement were shocked to see that the majority of the people wanted reunification. Annemarie Müller was not celebrating with the jubilant crowds on the day of Kohl's visit. She had believed that East Germany would survive the fall of the Berlin Wall.
In October, I co-founded the East German Social Democratic Party. I remember at the first events held here in Dresden that same year, people were already talking about reunification. I couldn't believe it. I hadn't been thinking along those lines, and it wasn't what I wanted. I'd never been afraid, but there I realized, goodness, if I speak out, I'm going to be beaten up. There was such euphoria, but there was simply no room for discussion. They wanted one thing and one thing only, reunification as soon as possible. And the Deutschmark as soon as possible.
We witnessed widespread anxiety after the wall fell. In the autumn of '89, more and more East Germans were packing up and leaving for the West. They didn't trust their government. They thought the border might close again. When Helmut Kohl visited the Frauenkirche, he knew that with his speech, he had to allay their fears and gain their trust, without whipping up further frenzy among the crowd.
In politics, feelings are never a good advisor, even though a politician needs to know how the people feel. That applied to this day. It was a day of deep emotions, but it was the rational thought which told him, if you act wrongly now, the door will shut before it even opens all the way.
Ladies and gentlemen, my dear young friends, dear fellow countrymen.
Liebe Landsleute.
Dear fellow countrymen, that gave me goosebumps. It was the first time that a West German politician described us as countrymen, not as a Soviet satellite like a Baltic state where people happen to speak German. That was how he began.
I'd like to start by sending you warm greetings on behalf of your fellow citizens in West Germany. The second thing I'd like to say is a word of appreciation and admiration for this peaceful revolution in the German Democratic Republic. It is a demonstration for democracy, for peace, for freedom, and for the self-determination of our people. And self-determination also means that we in the Federal Republic respect your opinions as well. We don't want to patronize anyone.
He was trying to show that they were equal. And he was trying to pacify them, to show them that they could benefit and they would have influence in a united Germany.
We won't abandon our countrymen in the German Democratic Republic. We want to work together as closely as possible, especially regarding the economy, with a clear goal to improve the quality of living in East Germany as quickly as possible. We want people to feel comfortable here. We want people to be able to stay in their homes and find their happiness.
There wasn't only cheering. There were lots of people towards the back of the crowd who just stood there, frozen, not believing what was happening. Others were just overwhelmed. The TV reports didn't show that there was a mixed reaction. They only showed the applause.
I saw his speech as a diplomatic masterpiece. He spelled out the "We are one people" message. We belong together, and we need to see what the future holds. None of us knew. But on the other hand, there was the reality. The reality of two states, two systems.
We want to enter a world with greater peace and greater freedom, which sees more cooperation with each other than opposition against each other. The House of Germany, our house, must be built under a European roof. That must be the goal of our policies.
We stand for the basic law, and we share your goal, German unity. But we want it to be agreed to by our neighbors and the Soviet Union in particular, because Europe must not be destabilized. Those were the messages. That was what the people wanted to hear. And they believed the Chancellor. They saw him as someone who'd gotten a lot done, so he'd get this done too.
Now it is up to us to continue peacefully along this path in the time ahead of us. To proceed with patience, sound judgment, and together with our neighbors. Let us work together toward this goal. Let us help each other in a spirit of solidarity. From here in Dresden, I send my greetings to all of our compatriots in the German Democratic Republic and the Federal Republic of Germany. God bless our German fatherland.
It was manifestly obvious that the East German people, as represented in Dresden, didn't want to try a third way. They wanted German unity.
Jürgen and I almost missed the speech. There was no mention of it on the official agenda. We were busy finishing up our TV report. Fortunately, when we were done, we ended up walking back into central Dresden. We went past the square. You could see the crowds arriving from afar. It was already dark. so we only caught the speech from far off. There was no mistaking the people's message to Kohl. They wanted reunification to happen fast. The East German leadership had no support.
That evening in Dresden, when we sat down together, we knew there was no point negotiating further agreements with Modrow's government. The only thing to do was get the ball rolling with free elections as quickly as possible. Clearly, our mistake was based on our expectation that the treaties we agreed on served as a foundation that made both states viable during that phase. That was pushed aside by Kohl very quickly.
It was one of the most difficult speeches of my political life. The people were waiting for a statement, not only there on the square, but across the country, in West Germany and in East Germany. Millions of people abroad who had their own concerns that had to be taken into consideration were also watching and listening. I sensed that.
Decades on, the square where Kohl gave his speech looks very different. Today it's dominated by the Frauenkirche, rebuilt after reunification. Financed by German and international donors from all denominations. It's considered a symbol of peace and reconciliation. Destroyed by Allied bombs in 1945, it now attracts countless visitors every year. Locals are proud of their city's landmark. Pastor Sebastian Veit says that Kohl's speech and the events of 30 years ago are inextricably linked with the Frauenkirche.
When you look at the images today, there he is standing in front of the rubble of the church, laying out the path to a new Europe. I think he laid the foundation for the rebuilt church to become not only a symbol of German reunification, but also of European unity. I would say that for the people of Dresden, it's a symbol of the change that came. They associate it with change that they themselves made happen.
But not everyone is pleased with that change. In the past 5 years, there have once again been demonstrations in front of the Frauenkirche. They are organized by Pegida, a movement begun in Eastern Germany that is nationalist, anti-Islam and far-right. Supporters feel left behind and blame the way reunification happened. We mustn't forget that these people had to relearn everything as a result. New laws, new regulations, a new type of economy. Some people see reunification as a gift, others as dictated. So, of course, some people felt left behind.
Obviously, there hasn't been enough of a dialogue with these people. Wanting reunification wasn't automatically a statement of support for a democratic system. They didn't know what that was. That process needs to be reappraised. If all these people are saying that maybe they want a different system, or that they're unhappy with today's Germany.
The number of people attending the Pegida demonstrations has shrunk, but the success of the far-right AfD in eastern states suggests there is still a significant number of people who are angry. Some say that these people feel their contributions to communist East German society are not respected.
That's the underlying feeling, and it's come to the boil these days. I don't know why exactly, after 30 years. But they don't feel taken seriously in their own country. They don't feel there's any acknowledgement of what they achieved in their lives.
The way the East German government that I was a part of was treated after 1990 was pretty shocking. They acted as though German reunification was up to the Chancellor alone. As a result, East Germany was completely sidelined. You can't do that and then be surprised by the AfD.
One thing's for sure. In that post-war period, the message Kohl was given by the people of East Germany was unmistakable. They wanted him to negotiate reunification and to do it fast. First, that fateful evening in Dresden in front of the ruins of the Frauenkirche, and again when it came to elections. He delivered reunification 9 months after his tightrope act in Dresden. The Dresden that Jürgen and I revisited is thriving. But we've met people who experienced that day in '89 and Germany's rapid reunification as a profound shock. The process had its disappointments, but hopefully Dresden will find a way to deal with populists looking to instrumentalize those disappointments. 30 years ago, in front of the ruins of the Frauenkirche, East Germans made a choice. They chose a free democratic society.
Let me say that my goal, should the historical hour permit it, remains the unity of our nation. And dear friends, I know that we can achieve this goal and that the hour will come when we will work together towards it, provided that we do it with reason and sound judgment and a sense for what is possible. The path there will be difficult, but it's the right path. It leads to our shared future.